I'm here to record my first single. What's it called? A Country, Christmas on the Res. It's my forthcoming Christmas album.
The great newsman Edward R. Murrow once said, "It's a monopolized opportunity to sit behind a microphone."
The bill passed by lawmakers amounts to nearly
Andy
$200
Harvey
million
gets that
in
opportunity
Texas
every
state
single
budget
day.
funding for most
He's a
state
reporter
agencies
at the
will
Phoenix
reduce by
NBC
nearly
affiliate.
7.5%.
But he's not just any reporter. He's a reporter from a severely underrepresented minority group, Native Americans.
While budget cuts are difficult, they are necessary. I was the only one. It still is, I've become so used to being the only Native American. You get used to it. When I first started off, it was intimidating. I was a little res kid, I mean, maybe not little, but I was a res kid. Came off the reservation, very shy, can be intimidated. This is a really tough business. It's competitive. You have to have a really thick skin.
That thick skin would prove necessary for Andy. Without it, he may not have gotten as far as he did. And without him, there would be no Native American representation in one of the largest news markets in America. Through this program, we will explore natives in the TV newsroom and the lack of representation of this minority group, and the problems that can go along with it. Hopefully, we'll pave the road for some solutions. Do you ever get nervous?
No. Well, you can. You're going live. You can't get nervous. You just gotta shake it out a little bit, maybe. But once you're on, you just, you kind of forget about it.
But what Andy can't forget is how hard it was breaking into this field. Andy always had a knack for telling stories. He went to Shiprock High School where he would do the morning announcements. That was what piqued his interest in broadcasting.
I'd announce the rodeo club is meeting tonight, or I'd interview homecoming queen contestants, stuff like that. It was my early introduction to journalism. That's how you do the news. It's time for it's my weekend now.
After he graduated with a degree in broadcast journalism from Northern Arizona University in 1999, Andy went job hunting for an on-air reporter position.
No one would hire me. I spent so much time, money, energy on tapes, resumes, putting in, updating all of that, sending it out, researching jobs.
Things started to look up, though. A station in Texas was looking to hire a native reporter. He was rejected.
I remember this is what she called it. You're a specialized on-air reporter who works best for your Flagstaff market and may not fit into our Texas market. I mean, how do you interpret that? I interpret it as, okay, I'm a long-haired Indian who does not match their demographics, their viewer. I mean, I'm a specialized on-air reporter. And what does that mean,
Good job.
That's a good interview. I didn't get my first full-time job until 2000 and my first full-time reporting job until 2004. Because I went back to the reservation, taught in the elementary schools for like a year, worked for the IHS Indian Hospital in Shiprock in the communications department. Just worked. Went back to the res to try to figure, I still wanted to do it. My passion was there, but I could not. No one would hire me. We're waiting for callbacks from Republicans, from the Republican lawmakers. So that's the next. We got the Democrat, David Lujan, on the budget story. So now. So how there was lunch.
Andy finally got a job in South Dakota as an on-air reporter because of the large Native American community. But years later, he ended up at a station here in Phoenix. But before he graced these studio halls, there was a reporter named Mary Kim Titla. She was the first Native American television reporter in Arizona for more than 20 years.
This was a fun one. This was for Best Sports Story. I love doing sports stories.
Oh, you do? That's cool.
And I covered the Chandler National Little League team going to the Little League World Series. So that was cool.
Oh, man.
There's another one, just general excellence. First place. I've got these all packed away. That was from 2004. That was probably the last year. And then,
Did you dominate these categories?
well, there weren't too many, to compete against. So, but see, like in this one, I got beat out for first place, second place. So.
Unlike Andy, Mary Kim got a job pretty quickly because of her heritage. She told a Tucson news director that she could bring a perspective to the newsroom that no one else could. But just like our nation's first people who underwent assimilation tactics at boarding schools just like this one decades ago, Mary Kim also had to assimilate to become successful.
I've always been very proud of my culture, and I wanted to reflect that in what I wore, and of course wearing the turquoise jewelry and beaded jewelry and things like that. And sometimes I would wear dresses that were native in style. And so my news director had a talk with me, and he said, you know, you might want to consider the perception that people have of you when you go on the air. Do you want to be known as the little Native American reporter, or would you like to be known as simply Mary Kim Titler, the journalist?
So she toned down what she wore. Mary Kim even worked on the way she spoke because she had an accent. When she decided to apply for that coveted anchor position, management told her she would have to cut her long hair. It was then she decided it was time to leave that station behind.
Before I had a lot of stuff up here with just mementos and things like that, and I just recently put them away. So.
Any Emmys?
No, that's one thing that eluded me. I have a nomination 1 year, which is exciting, and lots of other awards from the Associated Press and things like that. But yeah, that's one regret, is I wish I would have hung in there to get that Emmy. So I think it still can happen though, you know, because there's other ways to get Emmys now. So
Right.
In 2009, Native Americans only made up 0.5% of the TV broadcast news force. And not much has changed in the last decade.
I think duties of media is to let people know about who their neighbors are and what they're like, and you try to build a sense of community.
Cronkite professor Rick Rodriguez sits on a diversity committee that pushes for more minorities in the newsroom. He says Native American voices are important. For one of his classes, a student did a story on Navajo veterans.
Wars and stories that go uncovered, veterans coming home from the wars, is not a very a subject's not covered that often. And then when you go into the subset of veterans coming home to reservations, it's even covered less. And the stories are really illuminating. I mean, I think for the students and for me as an instructor who wasn't really familiar with the Navajo Nation, you're finding out that it's a totally different, in some cases almost a third world country within the borders of the United States, and it's a story that's not being told in mainstream media.
We lose out if we don't tell our stories, if we don't let people know. You know, whether it's funding, whether it's educating people. You know, there are people out there who still don't know about Native Americans. You know, they think we're dead. There are people out there who think we're all dead. You go to certain parts of the country, they think we're gone.
There are more than 300 Indian reservations in the U.S. and nearly 600 tribes. According to the last census, there are nearly 4 million Native Americans living in the U.S. today. So they're definitely out there. But when was the last time you heard of issues surrounding them? Maybe it's because their voice isn't as strong as it could be. Why aren't there more Native Americans going into journalism? We ask that very question to those who are trying to decide what they want to do with the rest of their lives. High school students. When you guys watch the news here in New Mexico, are there any Native reporters that you guys can identify with?
No.
My quest for answers takes me on a 325-mile-long drive, crossing state lines from Arizona into New Mexico. I had just found out a few days ago that Anita Luera, who's a recruiter for the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication, was already making the rounds at reservation high schools. The Navajo Reservation. We are in Gallup, New Mexico. It took us about 5.5 hours to get here. And the first stop that we're making is at Mia Mira High School.
I think it's the best journalism school in the country, obviously. I did graduate from there. I did have a television news journalism career for 27 years. Being able to go out to speak to high school kids about this was just really fantastic. It was almost like a natural fit to be able to get out there, talk to young people about why we need them in the field of journalism.